you all for being here. I do appreciate this. This should be kind of fun. Let me turn this a little. Oh, it buzzes at me. It makes noise. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about decision making. All of you are probably pretty good decision makers, or you wouldn't be here. You've made great choices in your career already. So let's take a look at where we're going to go. Now, what we try to do is provide objectives for you, for those of you who also are getting not only research units, but for those of you who might need continuing education units, you'll need the objectives. So that's why we put these things on here. And other than that, JD told me I had to add them, so you got objectives. That's good stuff. We'll look at some issues related to decision making because it's becoming more of an issue because of the rapid cycle of business as it is now. We'll look at some characteristics of effective decision makers, and then we'll look at two different models for decision making, an evolutionary and a revolutionary model. Then we'll talk about some additional tools and techniques, decision matrices, those sorts of things that we can work on. Now, automatically we have decision, and it's going to be easy. I made the wrong decision and thought this was an hour presentation. We will be out by 11:30. There are some slides that are really very, very simple that we'll be able to blow through very quickly. So you will get out by 11:30. And if I don't do that, you're welcome to get up and walk out.
I'll grab her before then.
Oh, thank you. Well, watch that. But okay. What's happening a lot now is, by the way, Bill, I can't walk through there. I'm going to walk right in front of the screen. So, okay, put that on the YouTube, and there we go. Okay, we are videotaping, and we are recording this thing, so I'll try and keep it clean. How's that sound? Okay. We know that life is busier, life is faster now. I'm one of those traditionals that Tim McKay was talking about earlier. I was born in 1949, so I well, I guess I'm not a traditional. I'm a baby boomer. Yeah, I married a traditional. Yeah. JR and I have a lot in common. I married a Marine. Now, he did not marry a Marine, but it's something when you date somebody for 2 months without realizing they can kill you and you didn't even know it. This is not a good feeling, but that's okay.
Don't surprise them when they're sleeping.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Well, never mind. Okay. Never mind. All right. I know. But that's okay. That's okay. So, environment or rapid change. Now, I've got some ideas on why making good decisions is difficult. Why do you think making good decisions is difficult?
Understanding what a good decision is.
Understanding what a good decision is. That's right. That's right. What's another reason? Well, AJ?
Absence of timely or accurate data.
Oh boy, you're so right. You are so right. Getting the data is a real issue. Certainly, and Tim talked about, well, no, actually, if any of you heard Tom Barlow's presentation right before this, he was talking about complexity in software development, and there was one question at the end of the session of, why can't we just reduce the complexity? Well, it'd be great if I controlled the world, but I am not Queen Grace. Other people have something to do with the decisions that I have to make. So there isn't a whole lot. Uncertainty. Do we always know exactly the decision we need to make, which is where you're coming up from? Do we always know the results that are going to come from the decisions that we make? There's so much in modern literature now about risk management. Well, why? Because there's uncertainty. Because we aren't really sure. We don't have all the votes. Somebody else is pulling some of those cards. When we do a stakeholder analysis, how often do we only have one stakeholder? Very rare. Very rare. It's when me, myself, and I are making a decision about my own career and my own life. And all of a sudden, there are already people who have some leverage on what I'm going to do with my life. Like the Marine. And he does really well. And heaven forbid that everybody doesn't always agree with me. That somebody has different perspectives on the situation. So that really makes a difference. Now, I look at some different dimensions for group decisions. There's the structure around which the decision is made. You were talking about what are the inputs of the decisions. For those of you who are in Lean and Six Sigma, you know that Y is a function of the X's that go into the decision and into the process of what we do. Then we talk about the roles of the decision maker and the stakeholders around which we are making that decision. So we want to understand better how those roles are going to affect how we make that decision. What are the processes around which we are making those decisions? One thing that many of you probably know about, the capability maturity model, where the different levels of maturity in an organization. Decision making, we have to make decisions no matter what. If we're in a corrective action situation, if we are even in level 1 of an organization where the processes are not defined, it's strictly ad hoc chaos, we are going to have less good information around which to make a decision than if we are at level 3, where we have defined our processes, we are working together, and we know how those processes impact each other. If we're at level 4 and we've already put those processes together in an integrated system, then we really are able, as JR was saying, to organize the data and get good information. All our companies are not at level 4 of a system-wide organization or level 5, which is a best practice. So we really have to make some decisions based on the level of process definition that we have. The other piece is, decisions are very personal. When you think about a team decision, if you're going to go into consensus with a team to make a decision, do you just automatically decide along with the team? Or do you have to have some internal personal thought and decision before you then communicate with the team to make that group consensus? What really happens inside of you when you make that decision? Bless you. Yeah, think about it yourself, or you just automatically, oh, let's go with the flow. I'd like to think that you're thinking a little bit about yourself first. Yeah. Okay. So our style and our personal style, how we deal with stress, our interrelationships with others, make a difference in how we make decisions. And then the norms, culturally. Several of our keynote speakers have talked about the culture of the organization. As we become more global, the culture and the relationships we have, and even the layer of communication that we have with an organization, if we are having an international webinar or teleconference, and we're trying to make decisions, I find personally that it's more difficult for me to make a decision with a number of people I do not have facial recognition with. I am the baby boomer. I am used to having a conversation with eyeball contact. I lived in Irving, Texas from 1980 to 82. It's been that long ago. Congratulations, Irving won the National Ball Region. That's great. I'm delighted. However, we do have to look at the norms of the different cultures. Do we speak like, you can tell I am not necessarily a shrinking body. So I have to be a little bit careful not to absolutely roll over people who are a little quieter in a conversation. So I need to back off a little bit and let somebody else think before we all make a group decision. You'd sort of think I don't have a whole lot of trouble with energy. My employees years ago started calling me the Energizer Bunny. I chase around like mad until somebody rips the battery out of my back, and then I fall over like a 2-year-old. And the older I get, the battery doesn't last as long anymore. I didn't make it quite to the end of the party last night. For those of you who were there, I'm delighted you had a really good time. But to keep the energy up helps us in decision making because it keeps the neurons firing in our brain. We can connect more ideas together, and that's really worthwhile. Now, I just came out of some work Monday and Tuesday. We're doing some in healthcare, some Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt work up in Northern Virginia. This is a phenomenal group. I don't know how many of you have worked with healthcare professionals? Yes. The level of commitment and energy that healthcare professionals have, because heaven forbid, other than a couple of physicians on Madison Avenue, New York, nobody's getting paid what they used to get paid anymore. But they are so committed to what they're doing that they have that energy of let's move because we know that we're helping the patient, we're helping the family, we're making sure that we're doing something good for the community, and this is working really well, and you get this energy that just propels us more quickly to where we want to go. And that's the kind of energy you want when you make decisions. It helps you to juggle the ideas more quickly. Now, the short-term wins are another really, really good thing. Especially now that budgets are getting bad, we want to look specifically at return on investment. How quickly can I get a win in a project? And in this one in Inova Hospital in Northern Virginia, they just in 10 months have returned $800,000 to the hospital system by reducing length of stay for patients who develop sepsis, or at least anticipate, sepsis. So many people die in hospitals from the infection they get once they go in, and not from the diagnosis of what got them there to begin with. So there are some things that we want to do to come up with some short-term wins, because everybody loves a winner. We feel better about ourselves when we get recognized, when we know. So our decision-making process is going to be more energized, and we are probably going to have that mental energy to weigh the different options more. You know, when you're tired, whatever, I'll worry about that tomorrow. I'm not going to get around it. But when you have the energy, when you're excited about the people you're working with, your decisions tend to be better. We can reward change agents, certainly. I'm not so sure we always have to do it by money. I'm sorry?
Amen.
Oh, yeah, no. Money, well, geez, when was the last time you got a raise? And the other issue is that if you're paid every 2 weeks, the raise comes in, you look at it, you figure out, okay, how much more goes into my 401k? How much more goes into my Christmas fund? How much more goes into taxes? And then you figure, ooh, I really got a $17 raise. And then how long does it take you to get really used to that additional $17? So frankly, you forgot the raise anyway. I happen to like that my manager or my director or the CEO knows me well enough in the hallway that there's an eyeball to eyeball and a connection from somebody I respect in the organization. And you can get wonderful recognition and relationships and energy to make decisions about the organization simply because our relationships are positive. So that's setup of the short-term wins, and looking and tying to the strategies of the organization make a lot of sense. What are some of the other things? There are sins. Things have been pretty discouraging recently. The economy has been down. Tim McKay was talking in the keynote just a little while ago that the newspaper, oh, so wonderful, yeah, right. How are we going to work through those hits to our self-esteem that are going to make us be a little bit cautious in the decisions that we make? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We want to keep our bosses on board, and I think another thing Tim talked about was, what are the three things? Communication, communication, and communication. That's sort of like real estate, location, location, location. The more we talk with each other, the more information we have in which to make, or through which to make good definitions or decisions. And then we do want to take the negatives or the, I can give it or take, and try and move those things to positives. How many of you have worked with a force field analysis before? Not too many. It's a really great tool, and many of you have the old memory jog or two in your library. Go back and take a look at force field analysis. There's an updated one that ASQ just published, the Quality Improvement Pocket Guide, that has a number of tools in it. Force field analysis really looks at the positives and negatives around a decision. And for those of you who've had accounting, a little T account, you put all the positive issues about your decision on one side and all the barriers, or I call them the yes buts. When you start thinking about what a decision is and somebody immediately says, well, yes, but. What you want to do in a force field analysis is maximize the effect and impact of the positive issues around that decision. And you want to address and minimize the barriers or the opposition to that decision. And that way, you are dealing with the situation, but you aren't forcing people to take a stand. You're just using the tool. Putting it up on a flip chart, and it works really, really well. So we have a number of ways and tools in quality to turn neutrals into positives. Fishbone analysis is another one. Hang all your issues on the fishbone, on the Ishikawa diagram, and just talk about it. Figure out where the priorities are, and off you go. Now, we don't have a lot of time anymore. For those of us, and a couple of the keynoters have talked about, let's be real specific and let's get all the data that we want. It isn't working that way anymore. There are times when you have to deal with chaos, you have to deal with confusion. Certainly, JR, when people were shooting bullets at you, I mean, you didn't just wait around to see where it came from. You know, what is this? You have to get up and move. So we have to deal with messes. We have to deal with indecision. We have to deal with uncertainty in how we make decisions. So certainly, if we want to get a little faster in what we do, but we don't want to just throw chaos at it. We want to have enough information in the back of our minds already that while we're running away from the gunfire, we still have enough information to be making reasonable decisions. So that means our antenna have to be up and going all the time. We really need to keep the, yeah, you nodded like, yeah, you've been there. Okay, got it. So what we need to do is speed up with our idea and get that sense of urgency. Now, to a certain extent, don't raise your blood pressure. Stay active, stay healthy. And it's really obvious that I run marathons, but that's okay. But work with action. There's that term of fail fast and forward, the pay it forward sort of concept. We have to deal with that more and more than we used to. Don't resist change. Change is a good thing. Now, I make my living off of change management now. And by the way, these slides are going to be available for you. And if you want, I have a business card. I can send them to you faster. For those of you who are like mad writing down all the slides, I can get them to you very quickly. What we want to do is focus our decision making and focus our data collection so that we're constantly, I don't know whether any of you remember Star Wars, the action troopers or whoever they were, the stormtroopers, had laser eyeballs and they're forever looking at the world.
That's Galactica.
That's Battlestar Galactica. You're right, it was the Cylons, it was not Star Wars. You're right, the earlier Battlestar Galactica, that's right. I'm old enough, so I remember the first generation of Battlestar Galactica. There's been another one now, and I missed that one. But that's okay. What we want to do is keep our antenna, keep your scanners going all the time. You need to be a laser calibration instrument, getting data all the time. So there are 4 recommendations that I have as you become more decisive and as you go into leadership. What we need to do, as a leader, you need to be a little more structured because people are looking at you for information. They're looking at you for stability. As you go up in your careers and you have people working for you, or you are in a team and you are a team leader, it's more important, and you don't have to get really rigid, but just a little more structure so that when people need a foundation to go to feel more confident, they can come to you. And you are there as sort of the Rock of Gibraltar. Now, we also have to communicate more. As we try to help others make good decisions, communicate as much as you can. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on that. All of you have done A3s, all of you have done team charters. You all know about communication plans. Use them. They are really important. And then also be visible. One of the things that I really enjoyed when I was a manager, I'm in semi-retirement now. I just love to work with people. You can tell I absolutely hate people. Just I'm going to go hide in the corner somewhere. But I love it. Is being as visible as you possibly can. Now, at some point, you get tired of having people pinging on you and you have to go get a little bit of privacy. But generally, the more you can be there with your folks, the more you can be seen with the team, the more they're seeing you with your shoulders back and your head up, so that you aren't looking like, oh my God, the latest decision was an absolute disaster, and people think, oh my goodness, impending doom. No, 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 no. We need to keep shoulders back, head up out of the gutter, and see what we're doing and where we are. And then we need to listen to what people are saying, and even just watch body language. That's another way that helps us make decisions. Here are some 4 basic principles. Let me shut up for just a second. What are some of the techniques you use in making good decisions? Yeah.
Due diligence on gathering the right data to make the decision.
Due diligence on gathering the right data. And the DMAIC process is really good for that. Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. PDSA is good, but I really like the 5-step process because the measure, pulling it out, gets us more to the due diligence. Okay, any other decision making? Yes, Karen?
Learning to make decisions with only 70% of the data.
Good.
Because if you make decisions at 50%, you don't need a decision maker, you need a coin.
Oh, that's a thought.
If you make decisions with 100% data, they don't need a decision maker, you already know what to do.
It's a good point.
Excellent leaders make decisions with 70% of the information.
Cool. Yes, ma'am.
I also realize that I don't know everything about the situation at hand, so I gather the opinions of 2 or 3 other subject matter experts on the topic.
I like that. Thank you. It is better to get a group decision because then people have skin in the game. Then they have committed to the situation in some way. Something I have found with naysayers is get them on the team. Delegate some data gathering or partner with them to get data gathering, to get the due diligence that you're talking about, but then they have the opportunity. I just stepped in something, you're chuckling over there.
I just said that you can also deflect blame too.
Well, you can deflect blame, that's really true. Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
That is not a characteristic.
That is not a characteristic of good decision making. Thank you, you're right, I like that.
That's more management than leadership.
Yeah, that's more management than leadership. I like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about self-confidence and self-esteem here in just a bit. Constructive relationships are very, very important. Decisions can be faster when we trust each other. Patrick Lencioni has written a really, really good book that Wharton Business School and a bunch of the others have used. I think Johns Hopkins University Medical Center uses it as well, on the 5 dysfunctions of the team. And one of the very biggest things is trust. Get to know the people you need to make decisions with. Now, certainly in the military, JR's doing one of these numbers. I mean, if somebody's shooting guns at me, I want to trust who's telling me where to go. So, yeah, thank you very much. Although, self-esteem is important. I've already talked about this. Empowerment is a word we've heard a lot, but we don't hear as much about accountability. Anymore, I'm running into people who say they've given me authority, but they haven't made me accountable, or they've empowered me and they haven't given the authority. Accept it. Just choose to work through it. Don't wait for somebody to give you the authority. Don't wait for somebody to give you the accountability. Just choose. You have lived your lives. Obviously, you're not 12 years old. Now, maybe a little that's a little age, okay, that's not going to make it up for you. That's not going to make it up for you. I'm sorry. Okay, now you know that I blush too. A little age discrimination here, but you have wisdom from having lived, and you have knowledge, and you are here, and thank you very much. Okay, now I'm embarrassed. All right. However, that accountability, and you choose to manage your own lives. That's really important and what we do. So how do we develop that mental stamina? Think differently. Try some innovation. And heaven forbid, there are some really good innovation tools now. Absolutely phenomenal tools that we didn't have before. Here, there is something here. Price Pritchett, for those of you who may not know, this company, and Price Pritchett is the original owner's name, he's done some really good books that you can read on an airplane. They are 1 segment long to read. And he has so many of these books on leadership, on time utilization, on just how we can manage our own lives and our thought processes so that we are more positive in gaining the outcomes we need for our career and what we do for our lifestyle. And he had a really good point. Of all the changes we need to make, the most urgent one is to change our minds. We can change machines. Those of you in lean, single minute exchange of dimes, you know all of that stuff. But how do we change what's in here? And I make a living of change management. But if you ask me to change, I'm going to have a knee-jerk reaction so badly that that knee is going to come right up into my forehead. I'm going to knock myself out. I have to laugh at myself when somebody asks me to change. My husband's decided he doesn't like the house we live in. About every 10 years he gets tired of the house we live in and wants to go move. I have to go home, pack. You know, the change management is just obnoxious. And yet I make my living off of it. What are the adjustments we need to make? And most of them are mental. That listening, how often do you have to just tell yourself, just listen to what's going on? Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood, in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey was one of my honors advisors at Brigham Young University years and years ago. Fantastic human being, absolutely fantastic human being. The other thing about decision making is, he said, start with the end in mind. That's the outcome. For those of you who do decision making, there are 3 kinds of measures we take. There are capacity measures in a process. Do we have enough capacity to get done what we need? Process measures, are we doing what we need to do and making the right decisions around that? And then there are the outcome measures. Well, we can measure all the process stuff in the world. We can do all those lagging indicators in the world. Well, the leading indicators, I always get those two confused. But unless we get to the outcomes, what good is it? Absolutely makes no difference at all. And the game is changing. Quick does trump careful anymore. Somebody else is going to get that competitive position before you do. And then it doesn't do you any good. You're right. Use 70% of the information. Thanks, JR. Very good idea. So if we think differently, we will see differently about our relationship in our workplace, our relationship with our employer, that relationship is human to human, and even our relationship with ourselves. That gives us that solid grounding so that we are more self-confident in the decisions that we make. This one I really love. Many of you, if you know, I'm from Missouri, I'll believe it when I see it. No, it's really the other way around. You have to believe it before you see it. The brain sees patterns better than any computer at all. And if I can envision something, chances are I can get there. If I can decide it's okay for me to accept this change, then it's going to be so much easier for me to make decisions and gather data that even may disagree with what I believe, but to get to that final outcome, because I can believe it, I can envision it. I have a dream, and we can get there. Also, we're getting more and more objective versus subjective judgments. When we were spending a lot of time, how are we doing on time, Hurricane? We're gonna... In manufacturing, when we're putting tops on bottoms, we're making a lot of objective decisions. When we're working now more in a service environment, we're taking more objective decisions, actually subjective decisions. You'd think I knew English. We're having to take a little wiggle room in just how valid is this data. Am I using opinion surveys and Likert scales rather than calibration? Somebody mentioned doing a gauge R&R on a performance system. Was that you? Yeah, that was JR. And I hadn't even thought about that. And I was a senior manager with IBM, and I was retired as head of a corporate organization. And yet that's really a good thought. Yes, ma'am.
We just did a gauge R&R across our entire business for appearance features on finished product. And you look for 100% agreement, and we were ending up with 20 to 30% agreement in many areas, with even the engineering and the management team. So it's always an opportunity to take something that's an attribute and apply objective standards to it.
I like that. I like that. And it is difficult in a service environment or in an opinion environment to try and put numbers so that we can have objective data and make that decision. Uncertainty certainly is an issue. The other thing is that it depends on what we value in the data that we are interested in and how we then interpret that data. Our own values will make a difference. Certainly, our personal judgments. A book that I have yet to write, I've been under contract with this one probably longer than any other book anywhere, is The Human Side of Quality. How do we make those decisions? Quality is not so much where is the data, it's what we do with the data. It's how we then make decisions around the data. We are imperfect. We don't process data the same way. That's inter-rater reliability, repeatability, the kinds of things all of you have certifications on. Yeah, there's a reason why we get trained about the difference, repeatable, reliable, reproducible, all those sorts of things. Now, there is a quality versus a quantity test that we'll look at here in just a minute on the evolutionary and the revolutionary decision making. What are some of the blocks that we put in our own way in making useful decisions? Fear of taking a risk. Oh, heaven forbid, could this be a career-ending event if I say something? I've had that issue. I've had to lease an airplane and fly $1 million part down through the Northeast into Atlanta, Georgia, because no trains were running up and down the East Coast for a while. That's what had to happen, but you better believe that I thought, well, I'm going to get fired for this, but we got to get trains going up and down the East Coast. Thank goodness the director, when we did the lessons learned afterwards, said, good job. You better believe I needed the pens after that conversation. But okay, that was kind of scary. Yes, all of us want to keep the status quo. It's comfortable, it's fun, we're just there, and this is just fine. Reality versus fantasy. How many of us have this image of what we want to have happen? I'm not hitting it at all, it just isn't happening. And the whole term of clueless comes to mind, but okay. And we work through that. And we may not want to be criticized. Leave me alone. Don't give me a bad time. I don't want to make a decision because I don't want to be held accountable and responsible for what that decision is. So we are going to have some issues. And then we get into those cultural issues. Taboos. I have an employee who worked for me, fantastic man. He had been in, and in fact, he's probably still alive, and he still is, in the lineage in Nigeria. He was in the line of kings in the country of Nigeria. Now you think that this man, fantastic human being, well educated, but his culture said, never meet anybody eyeball to eyeball. And in our society, if you're going to be a manager, you need to eyeball somebody and meet contact with eyes, or you aren't going to be taken seriously. We had to have those conversations. If this is where you want to be in this culture, can you make this transition? Now, apparently he did. Last I heard, he was a manager in Raleigh, was doing just fine. However, there are certain taboos we need to look at and respect. It didn't bother me if he didn't hit my eyes when we were doing management reviews, but I knew he was going to have trouble when he tried to do a performance review with his new employees. So there are issues there. We have the tradition. And again, coming back to the strength of the traditionals versus the baby boomers and what we do. And then sometimes logic and humor, and we just work through that. Let me get going because I think you've sort of gotten the idea here. There are some tools that we can use, some of the innovative tools. Metaphorical thinking, for those of you who have worked with Edward de Bono, the lateral thinking kind of activities. How do you get to a decision in a slightly different way? What can we do? Nominal group technique, how do we then, maybe in a quantitative way, we have multi-voting to make decisions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. Some fundamental objectives and means objectives. These really are the outcome objectives, and these are, remember the end, does the end justify the means? So that's the end, and that's sort of the means objectives of how we're going to get to where we're going. So how do we make decisions in revolutionary times? We do them together. It is really hard to uphold a decision that you make by yourself when you're shaving in the morning. Now, excuse me, some of the ladies don't do that yet. As you get older, you'll discover that there is a surprise. Okay. My husband keeps reminding me, but that's all right. Okay, how do we create more collaborative organizations? How do we get more data? We get more data by listening, we get more data by sharing with each other, we get more data by making sure, yes, that we use technology, but we also use the standard relationships that we have with other people. I am also a degreed anthropologist with an MBA, so what in the world am I doing in quality? I am, whatever. Okay. We need information on what we do. So how do you do this? Now this I know you could all teach. This is not a big deal with all the relevant stakeholders. This is sort of DMAIC right here. Get the stakeholders together, get consensus, do the process map. Okay, we're in the define measure. Designate the facilitators. That's going to be the measure and the analyze piece. Become a facilitated leader. And all of you know that's going to be the whole process of what we do in the process. Thanks. Okay. Good. Now, there are two different models that I like to use, the evolutionary and the revolutionary decision-making process, and we are just about done here. If we need to make a decision, down here, there are external events that can happen that cause us to change our environment and our situation. Normally, when we're in a situation or we're in a job, and we're just going along doing what we're doing, the same old process works, we're doing what we have in the operations manual or whatever it is. All of a sudden, things don't feel quite right anymore. Ever walk into a room and you can tell from the tone of voice, you can't hear the words, but you know it's either a really happy environment or there's something wrong. The hair goes up on the back of your neck. It's that feeling. The external event changed something. Well, the reason we can make decisions is that we know what our beliefs are. We know the foundation that we're built upon, that we would make decisions about. So we have the culture of the organization, or our own personal culture. We have the vision and goals, which is the current state. This is basically gap analysis for those of you who have been through this before. And then we know where we are going in the future. So what we want to do is align our current agenda with where we think we're going. Now, easy if we're in an evolutionary model and things are just sort of going along normally, we might be able to look at how our culture would resolve this situation normally, and we have it compatible with whatever new solutions we come up with in our Ishikawa diagram and our root cause analysis, and it's relatively easy to make the decision. That's not happening as much anymore. What we're finding in the revolutionary times is that there is more influence from the external events, especially as we have global supply chains, especially as we have better information from global situations and better information from new technologies, whatever it is. We still have the same culture of the company, we have our vision, we have our activities, but what happens is that it's possible in our as-is state versus our future state that we still can come up with some solutions that are relatively easy for us to implement. And we don't have radical change in what we're trying to do. But more and more we're finding that there is an incompatibility between where we are now and where we need to be. New competition has come in and new technology has come in. Think about it, research in motion. BlackBerry up in Canada, poor souls, they were the company to beat for years and years and years, and unfortunately the touchscreen smartphones have taken the buttons out. And now people aren't buying BlackBerries as much. I feel very badly. BlackBerry is a fantastic organization, and not only that, the federal government of the United States bought a lot of BlackBerries. Now I don't know what the federal government is going to do without BlackBerry. That's going to be really interesting. So what we have to do is, if we do not have an easy decision-making process, then we come up with multiple survivors of potential solutions. And all of us have been through at least yellow belt training or PDCA training, and we know that we want to come up with some different alternatives in root cause analysis. Don't go right to the first solution. There's usually more than one right answer in what we try to do. So that's when we get into the quantity test. For those of you, how many of you have used multi-coding or matrix analysis or decision-making? For those of you who have not, again, memory jogger in the bookstore, and there's also this other one, the quality improvement pocket guide, that have a number of these tools. And if you got Russ Westcott's Certified Manager of Quality Review Guide that is about this thick and you can throw a football at it and it won't move, 5 minutes, okay, I'll shut up. You'll get a bunch of the different tools on how to weight your decision making. All right, how do we deal with uncertainty? How are your decisions affected? By framing choices, by scope. Remember in a charter, what's the scope of your issue? Continue with that. That's where we are. Are your decisions affected by pseudo-certainty? Are you only listening to some of the input? Are you getting enough input, but only 70%? Because if you're going after 100, you're waiting too long. The world passed you by. Keep going. How do you differently respond to the framing of paying premiums versus accepting sure losses? The issue is that's the return on investment. If I can look at net present value of the decision that I'm making, so that maybe I lose $5 now, but what I'm doing is going to net me $50 in the future on that decision, let's roll the numbers. Let's look at the dollar signs and how that's going to work. And, yes ma'am.
And I would preface that by saying, look at the total cost to the business of
Thank
those
you.
kinds of decisions.
Yes, yes, yes. Look at the total cost. Somebody mentioned earlier in a keynote, we're siloed. If you work in silos to make decisions, you're only working off a portion of the information, and that's an issue. How do you frame the problem so that you get as much feedback as you can from people in what you're doing? And this, number 9 is interesting. How rational are your intertemporal choices? Are you looking at things pretty much the same way this week as you are next week? It's okay if you're not, but just realize that you're working off different information, and you are going to have to take into account what those things are. All right, let's summarize this one. Change perpetuates decision-making. Well, yeah, when things change, we have to respond to them. Or it'd be even better if we could anticipate them and make decisions before it gets done to us. I like this one in the middle. As a matter of fact, they've been playing Revolution by the Beatles all this week, and this is really a John Lennon. I'll try with a little help from our friends. That's how we make better decisions. This is John Lennon and not the Beatles as a whole. And know the risks and reward in what we're doing. All right.